and welcome to MSI Cooldown. G2 were able to take down the Buffaloes. It was a happy game, some might say. One more of these slightly more chaotic, all over the place, action-packed, but G2 never really felt out of control.
Yeah, I mean, you looked at the bot lane, it's like, oh yeah, well, FLICKR it's 0-3. Then you look at the mid lane, it's like 7-1 for Jankos. Caps has got 8 kills, and you're like, this is going to be fine.
Yeah, I feel like, you know, there's some nice innovations coming out from the Saigon Buffalo, really creative, but the burden of execution was high, and ultimately, Froggy just got bullied in that game.
I mean, styled on by Caps. Another phenomenal performance. But I do want to highlight brother Jankos. All of the G2 players were memeing about the fact that Jankos sometimes hurts his team when coming up against the VCS. But again, working with Caps in that mid lane. And Aux, as soon as we take a look at some of these plays. Oh, this is from early in the day as well. Just another great performance from G2. They pick up the win, and the win streak is alive.
Yeah, I mean, I think that for Jankos, he's been absolutely incredible for the mid lane there, just kind of helping out Caps with, as you saw, like the level 2 gank there, being able to set things up, and then actually having the big impact that we saw from today as well. I think Jankos has been so stellar for G2, and a bit of an unsung.
Yeah, I feel like everyone's focused so much on Caps, with good reason, by the way, but Jankos has been there every step of the way, ensuring that his mid laner has everything he needs to carry. And ultimately, this is actually a game where Jankos was a really relevant carry himself on that Graves, and showed that, you know, that old man still does have hands.
He really, really does. Phenomenal performance so far, and G2 will stay 4-0, undefeated. They won 12 games domestically, and now they won 12 games here at MSI. We are waiting just to get an interview set up, and I think it's a difficult situation now on the other end of the table because the Buffaloes, they surprised a little bit, they shocked, but now they're on a 4-game losing streak in Rumble. It's starting to put a lot of distance between them and the teams that have wins.
Yeah, it's starting to get to the point where it's not just about beating EG and PSG to make it back. Look at the second round robin. They might actually need to take games off one of the top 3 to have a chance of making it into the next round of the tournament. So the pressure is building. They're struggling to find a way to sort of find success. You know, they had those early game compositions and groups that worked well, trying to find that early pressure. But now it just feels like they're trying different things and nothing's working.
Yeah, and I think that's the big takeaway for me. It feels like they're still trying to almost find their style, and you're at the international competition now, right? Like, they've been trying to play around bot side, hasn't really worked out for them. Now they're trying to play around has mid, still can't really find that working for them either. It feels like, at least when they were playing against DFM and they were like, oh, we got the strong bot lane into skirmishes and a Rift Herald and team fights, that was an idea that they could work with. But now that they're in with the big boys, they just don't seem to be able to match up toe-to-toe in those early skirmishes.
The thing that I do like, they are still sticking to that early aggression in your face, trying to force errors and create opportunities. But every other team in the Rumble stage thus far has been able to deal with that pressure and has demonstrated a slightly higher level of sort of macro and, you know, mid to late game strategies. So for Buffaloes, things are getting pretty tense. For the rest of Cooldown, we will talk about a few more games as well as talking about the expectations, but we are just waiting for that interview. And I'm just going to sit with G2 for a moment because they would have been sitting backstage watching the RNG versus T1 game, and I cannot wait to hear what they think about it as well as what ramifications that will have for the rest of the tournament.
Yeah, ultimately, I think both teams got bloodied quite a bit in that one. I don't think either team came away clean, saying, okay, we had a flawless game. By all means, T1 obviously had a lot of issues, but RNG as well. We've hammered on this tournament Bin's inconsistency. That was not a good game for Bin.
I have never heard you so much like, what are you doing?
Oh, my lord. When he died and TP back in to die again. And the thing is, we've seen games like the Gangplank game this tournament. Bin can be phenomenal. And I think that's why I have so much frustration, because this player can be one of the best in the world on a good day, but it's just like the inconsistency. Regular season really struggled. Finals, he was the MVP, and it's like that back and forth. It's so hard to judge which Bin you'll get.
And it's been really interesting because, like, I think a lot of people looking at Bin used to play for Suning, obviously, had that big performance when he went to the World Finals. I think a lot of people are still looking at that Bin and expecting him to be the one that's on the stage. But people kind of forget that, you know, he had Sword Art playing towards him. He had the entire team set up to play around him. And RNG aren't willing to give him those resources. And now you're kind of seeing that he can end up being exposed a little bit because he tends to play over aggressive.
It didn't hurt too much today. We are going to go to the interview. We'll come back and discuss the match just a little bit more. But right now, Law is standing by with Broken Blade after their win over Saigon Buffaloes in the Verizon post-game interview.
Thank you, Trev. We're back in Busan to wrap up day 2 of the Rumble stage. Bibi, thank you so much for joining me. Trev was describing your game as being a happy game. How do you respond to that?
I mean, it wasn't a happy game for me because I had to play against Vayne top as Sion. But I'm sure that our anti-secret agent, Jankos, has had a very nice game. I mean, he had like 10 kills or something. So I'm sure it was very fun for him.
Coming back to the Vayne topic, I don't want to be rude, but you kind of put yourself in this situation to play against Vayne. surprising, I would say. Not the best matchup to play Sion. Why did you do that?
I mean, they flexed it, right? Like we thought it was Vayne bot lane against Ezreal, and then they flexed the Vayne into Sion top and then picked Vladimir, right? So I didn't really, I was not thinking that he's gonna pick Vayne top. We knew he plays it. But I mean, I think the team comp that we had and the way we played, like I was giving really clear communication of like how we can play against Vayne, which was go through mid and then into top, which was literally what we did. Like Targamas didn't even lane bot and he was just mid and top the whole game, so it was just really hard for Vayne to play, you know. And that's how we like countered the Vayne.
It was worth it in the end. Talking about the bot lane, actually, I didn't expect them to pick Senna Vladimir. Not something we see usually. What's your take on this bot lane and the matchup?
I mean, I think it was a thing in the past that people picked Vladimir into Ezreal, but I think it was more so that because they had the Senna, they were more open to like a lot of combinations, right, in draft, and we checked their picks, and they like to pick like these freaky little picks, you know. Yeah. But in the end, it didn't work out. Even though they got some couple kills bot lane, I think our mid jungle was just very strong in this game, so it was just unplayable for them.
Yeah, indeed. Something they also mentioned on the desk. I want to talk about Jankos in that sense because playing an OP champion, still he had a huge impact on the game. How do you reflect on his performance and what he did?
I mean, he's always like, oh, if Grace gets kills early game, he's a really strong jungle because he clears so fast. And then we always call it the Scrim Grace when the Grace gets a lot of kills. And once he got like 4 kills, we were like, oh, Scrim Grace is online, guys. And then after that, the game is just so easy because he was literally, I think he like did 3 autos on Vayne on top. Yeah. And then he died, which is just easy to play after, you know, especially when you're playing a tank, you're just farming, getting pushed in by Vayne, and then there's a 10-0 Grace coming, just one-shotting everybody. Is, you know, I'm just laid back playing, and my jungle is carrying, so...
Kind of OP, but yeah, playing super well. We almost wrapped up the first part of the Rumble stage. How do you reflect on the competition you faced so far? Who challenged you the most on the top lane?
I'm not really sure. I think obviously T1 and RG, they are very good teams, and I'm looking forward to play them again, especially because now we did beat both, and they probably want to get revenge. And I think those 2 games are probably going to be the most challenging. I think NA can maybe be challenging as well, even though they did lose all the time. I'm pretty sure it's like stuck in their heads that they never win against EU, at least in this MSI. So they probably want to beat us really bad, which probably won't happen, but I'm definitely looking forward to any game we play. We will still have to play against PSG, which can also be a surprise, because I don't even think that they're a bad team. So
yeah, PSG is a story for tomorrow, the last team you will have to play. But I mean, so far no one managed to beat you. I'm still wondering what could be improved for G2. What do you see as areas of improvement for the team?
I mean, I do think we're still not a perfect team. Obviously, I think there's always room to improve, and the great thing about this team and this whole organization, I feel like they're always looking to get better. Even if we are on a really long winning streak, we're not actually cocky, even though we just beat like T1, RNG. It doesn't really matter for us. Like it kind of does, but not really as well. And we always look to get better as a team, and we have really open discussions when there's issues. We actually just go there and talk with the players, with the staff, like heart by heart, you know, and we really care for each other, and I think that is very key to why we're actually so good.
Yeah, you have a well-rounded system, and yeah, don't be cocky. I think that's the most important. Bibi, thank you so much for the interview. Congrats on a perfect day once again. And Berlin, back to you.
Thank you so much, Law and Broken Blade. And you can feel the excitement, the energy. Broken Blade doesn't sound stressed, nervous. Obviously, he's on a 24-game winning streak. But I think
they're in a good position.
The intangibles of like the team environment, the way in which you deal with challenges and feedback and things. Because G2, they were not the favorite to even win the spring finals, but the lower bracket run has, you know, molded them into something that currently is undefeatable at MSI.
And I think outwards, everyone looks at G2 as a super cocky team, like super arrogant, like trash talking, we're going to win. But I think the talk there, and you can kind of see this is a team who are like always looking to improve. Even if a game is a win, that's not enough. They're looking to try and find a way to make sure they continue winning, which is so critical in a tournament like this, because despite the fact they've had those wins against T1 and RNG, they will face them again. They will probably face them in the knockouts as well.
crucially, I think that performance element of the trash talking and the banter and whatnot, I think it just generates hype. It makes it a little bit more interesting to watch. Right, I want to move us on because we've got a lot to talk about here in Cooldown. Let's take a look at the standings after day 2 of the Rumble stage. And we're going to go through some of the matches that we didn't quite have as much time as I would have liked to cover. I want to start with obviously the most exciting game of the day, in my opinion, RNG versus T1. There is so much to unpack and talk about, and we were starting to highlight some of the criticisms of individual players, some of the question marks we had, but ultimately, RNG were able to play to their style, punish the Baron, and come back through great fighting.
Yeah, it wasn't only the Baron, though. It felt like when we got to a lot of these kind of objectives at the top side of the map, RNG just set themselves up better. You can see here for the Rift Trail play where you end up picking off 2 members of T1 before they can even try and set themselves up. Then, as you say, later on, we had that Baron fight as well. It just felt like when we got towards these neutral objectives, that's where RNG were able to kind of lean into what has been their bread and butter in the LPL of being able to take those fights and run away with the game.
And this honestly kind of, in some ways, felt a bit similar to the T1 G2 game, where T1, it was definitely messier, not as clean, but they outperformed in the early game. But when it came to the team fight and execution there, RNG's comp, it felt like it was easier to find these angles. Now, this is an example of a team fight where T1 could maintain distance, but a lot of them, they got on the back line, they disrupted them. And I mean, Gala and Shahu were just so good.
I mean, Gala, another fantastic performance. His Kai'Sa repositions during the course of that fight, the entire game rather, was completely game-changing. Had he not picked up the CS and the kills early, that game could have gone very, very differently because of what Bin and Wei were doing in the early game. So I know Augs absolutely loves it. I also want to go back to EG versus PSG because that was one of the games that we truly weren't 100% certain which direction it was going to go. I think you could have made a defendable argument that either team could have won, but as we watched the game, what is your immediate takeaway or thoughts on how it played out?
Well, I mean, for me, it's on your screen right now, right? I think that when you look towards PSG talent, they'd done an incredible job of setting up for objectives in the past. But when you actually look at the way that they played out, EG were the ones contesting mid-wave, getting priority on the map, and then moving in to set up these objectives much cleaner. And it meant that when you got towards the team fights, even when Hanabi was making incredible plays like this, EG were still the ones coming out on top.
And I feel like this obviously wasn't a 100% perfect game from EG. There was definitely mistakes, some early dives that they had to back away from and were disrupted. But ultimately, I felt like they were the ones who constantly had the agency. I wanted to see PSG unlock their bot lane, have Kaiwing roaming and try and set the pace. But ultimately, EG were the ones making the moves, and it just favored them so heavily. Even when they had to step back and things didn't work, they always kept pushing the game on.
And it honestly felt like for Kaiwing and Unified, they played this game amazingly in the early stages, right? They got a ton of pressure from Evil Geniuses. It was like 2 different dives that were down there with multiple people trying to set them up. They were down at the 3-minute mark, then you see them at the 7-minute mark, and you're like, Jesus, lads, can you just leave us be? But they were still continuously going for this, and Kaiwing and Unified managed to outplay them, get away, but it just wasn't enough.
And I feel the problem is when your bot lane is absorbing so much pressure, doing so much to mitigate what the enemy team are doing, you should get something in return. And that was the problem. It never felt like PSG were getting something in return for how well the bot lane was defending. It was kind of like, okay, bot lane didn't die to the dive. Cool, let's wait for the next one.
What I like as well is the fact that EG identified that, correctly strategized, play the game out by shutting down the danger players for PSG. And of course, because EG picked up that win, they also took down Saigon Buffaloes. They're now currently sitting in 4th place. And I want to take a few minutes to talk about pre-tournament expectations versus the realities and what we're actually seeing taking place on stage. Because I think it's fair to say that people expected EG to be able to pick up wins, likely looking in that 4th place seed. But nobody was expecting G2 to come out swinging, to play the way that they did, and to still be undefeated right now.
Yeah, I think G2 have been absolutely incredible, and I think a large portion of that has obviously been Caps. He's been the big talking point, but I actually kind of want to take it one step back, because I think Jankos is the unsung hero of this team. We kind of talked about it a little bit earlier on, but we could see in like their game against Evil Geniuses, right? Jojo Pune was actually doing a really good job of getting control in the matchup against Caps, and they just get Jankos roams in, that traditional gank level 2, gives Caps the reset, gets an opportunity for Caps to, well, reset the lane in general, and then he's able to set up and be that big carry once more. And it feels like this has been such a big factor for Jankos throughout the day, where he's falling behind in like experience and when he looks towards the CSD, but when you actually look at his goal difference, he's been so instrumental to setting Caps up that he's actually coming out with about a 300 goal.
Do you think it's fair to say G2 overperforming versus expectation? I think that's a pretty safe one to say.
I think 100%. I think a lot of people looked at them as being potentially 2nd or 3rd. Most would say 3rd, but people thought they could beat out RNG. I don't think many people had them above T1. And honestly, it's kind of similar to the playoffs, right? People didn't expect G2 to win the domestic playoffs. And it's similar coming into this tournament. It's like, sure, they had a great final run towards the LEC, but they have really just kept improving over that course, and they look so on form.
Okay, you mentioned RNG. I want to go to them next. How do you interpret the games that we have seen? Aux, you and I have done a lot of analyst desks, and almost every single thing that you mentioned or disliked or were frustrated by RNG domestically, I think has come true here.
Yeah, 100%. I think they were tested a lot domestically, and we saw these issues. I think that's the difference between T1, who everyone sort of thought they would win domestically way before the finals, and G2, who had that big stomping run through playoffs. RNG had to fight, right? And we saw issues, inconsistencies with Bin. We saw Wei not being on point every single game. And we saw Xiao having to turn into that facilitator role where he wasn't that individual carry. So I feel like the fact that they are currently in second, the fact that we've seen those problems resurface, and it's a bit of a back and forth, it's what I expected. My big question is, can they improve on that and look to challenge G2?
I'm very intrigued to see what fans and viewers at home feel about expectations of RNG versus performance. I think they're performing at expectation, in terms of their playstyle and their decision making. And the next one I think is going to be a pretty tricky one, because the Saigon Buffaloes, they came into the event as the second seed because GAM obviously went to the Southeast Asia Games. They play a style that is still in your face. They are not afraid of absolutely anyone. In the very first game, they go really aggressive into Guma and Carrier. That made us buy into some hope. And now I don't know if they are performing below expectation or to expectation, because it's a very nuanced conversation.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie. Like, I was price watching the hype train for Saigon Buffalo. I was kind of like, how are we going to feel out? Because you do get them going really well against T1. They end up, well, I say very well in the early stages against T1. Then you have the games against DFM where you're like, okay, well, now they're actually starting to go up against the Japanese team, and the LGL have done pretty well when you look at them internationally. And then you're coming in and going, all right, well, can they continue this on into the Rumble stage? And my answer was honestly yes. I mean, you've heard several of the guys saying, look, we were terrified of what Saigon Buffalo would bring to the table.
Yeah.
And if they'd be able to upset the apple cart because of that hyper aggression, but it just doesn't feel like they've been able to get the same style or even the ball rolling in the same way that they did in the early stages from groups.
Yeah, and I think ultimately we didn't know really what to expect from the VCS because they've been absent for such a long period of time. They came out just all guns blazing in the group stage and had a good performance. But I feel like the way they play, that sort of early aggression, that trying to catch other teams off guard, that starts to work less and less as the tournament goes on, and teams are ready for it. Teams at this stage have seen a lot of that play. They expect what Saigon Buffaloes are going to do, and so they've been able to respond. And I think as a result, it's getting really difficult. And that's why they become very experimental, have to try through things, but time is running out.
So then for the second seed from a region we haven't seen in a long time, but still playing their way, at least trying to upset in the early game, at expectation?
I'd say probably. I don't think anyone had them sort of too high in the standards. Maybe, especially coming out of group stage, or even in group stages, people thought they could be potentially a solid competitor, but a lot of people downplay them because they aren't even the first place team from their region. I think regarding the hype train sort of conversation, one of the big reasons people got so sold on this team is because they're so fun to watch. And I feel like it's so easy to get invested in a team that are fun to watch, even if the results weren't always there.
All right, let me move us along. Just talk about one more team, and this one could be a little bit more controversial. T1. Under, over, or at?
Get the two LPL lads to talk about this.
Let's get some opinions first on the gameplay and then try to make an assessment.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I feel like there's been such a big question mark about the bot lane. Because going in this tournament, I think everyone, a lot of analysts saying Carrier, best player in the world. And the bot lane, best bot lane in the world. And we've seen them challenge consistently in a way that we didn't really see domestically. Getting all in early, dying in the 2v2. And even outside of lane, I think Carrier has been strong, but Gumi Yusi has had problems.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And look, they have had some great performances. Like you look against G2 where they were able to get these leads against Targamas and FLICKR, but it just feels like so many times they're actually getting outpaced by teams like Saigon Buffalo. And then when you get into these mid-game fights, they're not really being set up for success, in particular Gumi Yushi, right? Like we're seeing them T1 kind of toss in towards these neutral objectives and look for these flips, and they're not able to just outclass their opposition like they did in LCK.
Yeah, and I think you can see from this clip a moment where Gala was the pivotal carry, getting the MVP of that game up against T1. And, you know, I think people were sort of weighing up, is Gala better than Gumi Yusi? But a lot of people sort of said Gumi Yusi is the one who has the edge. And I just feel like they haven't shown it. They haven't shown what they've done domestically.
Yeah, I also just think from the perspective of not even just their bot side, honestly, their ability to just play the map in general in the mid game has kind of been a little bit disappointing for me, right? Like we've seen them continuously flip these Barons, and they've got big leads with Zeus, who I think has been amazing for T1. I have been so thoroughly impressed with this guy, but it just feels like giving him a little bit more leeway to play side lanes, like open up the 1v1s. I expected that to be a style T1 could lean into, but we just haven't seen it.
I'm very, very intrigued to see how the second round robin plays out and which one of these teams will start to stabilize. We're still only on day 2 of the Rumble stage, so we can't make too many bold assessments, but I do think checking ourselves versus expectations was definitely something as important to start doing. Now, let's take a look to tomorrow's schedule. 6 more games on the book. The first 3 will round out the first half of our round robin, and then looking at the second half of the day, RNG versus G2. I think also I'm very intrigued to see how Evil Geniuses will play against T1, whether or not there's anything that you can glean from the games that they have performed, and also how do they bounce back from today?
Yeah, ultimately, Evil Geniuses, it's going to be hard, but I think they are the, we talk about the top 3 and the bottom 3. EG have started to look better and better. They look like there was a clear divide between them and PSG Talon. And the thing is, if this is a T1 who are struggling, if this is a T1 who have issues, there's potential for an upset. I wouldn't rule this one out.
I sincerely hope so. I do actually have something a little bit special before we close out the day. Because, of course, Impact is going up against T1. I asked to see whether or not we could get them to talk. And Law is standing by with Impact in our Verizon post-game interview.
Welcome back to Busan for MSI 2022. I'm here with Impact. And Impact, thank you so much for joining me for this interview. I wanted to talk to you specifically because we're here in Korea, and the last time you played in Korea was in 2014, just before you went to NA. What does it mean to you to be back in your home country and play this competition?
I don't know. I feel weird to back to play in Korea because I don't know. I feel like I'm back to HK, and when I hear the Korean casters, I don't know. I feel like I'm boomer, like wow. I play only 10 years, and I don't know. My life doesn't change. I play same game, and my lifestyle is same. I'm a little bit different because I'm do workout and care about my wrist more, but still my life is same. Play game League of Legends, but yeah, I feel it was weird. Like it's not comfortable. Like but. I don't know what to say, but it was good, I think.
Yeah, I can imagine. And we're about to reopen a very important page of the League of Legends history because your next game is going to be against T1, against FLICKR, the mid laner you won Worlds 2013 with. Tell me how you feel about this matchup, about facing him and meeting him on the Rift once again.
It feels great because it's we are all teammates and we played at the 2013 and 14, right? And still we playing, he and me only. So I don't know. It should be interesting game, and I hope. But if he's mid lane, I'm top laner, so I don't care. Maybe I'm gonna gank mid and see what's gonna happen, but should be fun.
Sneaky gang on the mid lane, unexpected from a top laner, I think, in this meta. You were saying that you've been playing for so long. Still think that you won Worlds 2013. You and FLICKR have been playing for such a long time, and the fact that you're still playing on your top level is really impressive. Impact. How do you reflect on your career and your achievements over time?
I'm not sure about that. I can say that I'm all the time in this top class because sometimes I play bad, I think, in some tournament. But I'm proud of myself. I made that play 10 years, and I play well at some invitational tournament. Now I didn't plus my ulti and the Trinidad. But Dutch boomers sucks, but I still can do better. So, I'm proud of myself.
You can be proud, indeed. Massive respect for you and everything you achieved in Impact. And looking forward to seeing this boomer matchup tomorrow against T1. Thank you so much for the interview. And Berlin, back to you.
What a heartwarming interview. So much smiles
I'm proud of
and
him
laughs.
too.
I'm so happy, and it's infectious when you hear and you see Impact, and it is true. He's had a very long career. There have been some ups and downs. I really appreciate some of that self-reflection, but I'm very intrigued to see who's going to be able to pick up that win tomorrow. I think seeing T1 drop games will inspire EG and Impact.
Yeah, I'm really hoping for that sneaky mid lane gank now. I just want to see if it's just like, hey, I'm back in Korea, remember me?
But I think it's just fantastic because a lot of people talk about when players sort of move from Eastern regions towards NA, sometimes for the money. I feel like Impact has still continued to compete and still continue to push himself to the point that, you know, he has won the LCS again, and he has won so many titles because he still, despite having moved away from Korea, wants to be competing, wants to be returned into these internationals. And yeah, I mean, such a heartwarming interview.
It absolutely was. Such an interesting day. Lots more to come over the next 3 days. However, that's it from the Irish Analyst Desk. See you tomorrow for 6 more games on the Rumble stage.
Slán What?